Look, I am going to be completely honest with you guys. My heart stopped for a second when I woke up and saw the headlines today. Imagine sitting on a beach in Key West, Florida, sipping a cold drink, looking out at that beautiful blue ocean, and realizing that just 90 miles across that water, 300 long-range attack drones are sitting in hidden silos. And some military commanders are actively debating whether to launch them at your shores. That is not a script for some futuristic movie. That is the literal reality facing us right now. On May 17, 2026, Axios just dropped a massive classified bombshell report that changes everything we know about national security and, more importantly for us here, how we protect our hard-earned money. I remember back in 2022 when the Ukraine war started, everyone thought it was a localized issue, and then boom, the markets collapsed, inflation soared, and gas prices went through the roof. Now, the threat isn't tea across the Atlantic Ocean, it is right at our front door, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. When geopolitical risk hits this close to home, the average investor panics, sells everything at the absolute bottom, and ruins years of financial progress. Oh shit, we are not going to let that happen to you today, because today we are breaking down the exact strategy to build an absolute fortress around your portfolio. Let us look at the cold, hard facts of what is actually happening on the ground before we talk about the money side. According to this leaked intelligence report, the Cuban communist regime has managed to buy over 300 advanced military attack drones. They did not build these things themselves because their own economy is completely broke. They bought them from Russia and Iran, two countries that have perfected the art of cheap, asymmetric drone warfare over the last few years. The scary part is that U.S. intelligence intercepted communications showing Cuban military officials actively discussing contingency plans to strike the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay, U.S. Navy vessels cruising the Caribbean, and potentially Key West, Florida. Now, the Cuban government is coming out and saying this is all a fabricated lie by the Trump administration to justify a military invasion. But the CIA Director John Ratcliffe was just in Havana a few days ago, delivering a massive ultimatum to play ball or face the exact same fate as Venezuela. Think about the pure madness of this transition in modern warfare. If you look at the official data for the Cuban Air Force right now, it is a complete and utter joke. An absolute ghost town. Every single one of their Soviet-era fighter jets is listed as non-operational because they do not have the spare parts. They do not have the money for maintenance, and they do not have the fuel. They literally have zero capability to launch a traditional airstrike against a modern military like the United States. Their main air defense systems are the S-75 and the S-125, which were designed back in 1957 and 1961 to shoot down old Cold War planes against an American F-22 Raptor, an F-35 stealth fighter, or the brand new B-21 Raider. Those ancient Cuban systems are 100% useless, just expensive lawn ornaments. So, what does a desperate, broke communist regime do when they know their traditional military is completely useless against a superpower? They go to the school of asymmetric warfare. They pivot entirely to drones. They watched how Iran disrupted the entire global shipping industry using cheap drones. They watched how Russia used thousands of Shah drones to overwhelm massive air defense networks in Europe, and they decided to do the exact same thing. You do not need a billion-dollar air force when a $3,000 drone carrying 20 pounds of high explosives can fly 90 miles and hit a cruise ship or a power grid. And guess who is hanging out in Havana right now, helping them set this up? Iranian military advisors and Russian electronic warfare technicians. This is a massive deal because Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just testified in front of Congress that having this type of threat so close to American soil is highly problematic and completely unacceptable. The Trump administration has already declared a national emergency regarding Cuba, enforced a massive fuel blockade that has left the island in near constant blackouts, and hinted at a friendly takeover of the island if things do not change immediately. So, the geopolitical tension is boiling over, the match is lit. And we are sitting on a powder keg, but as smart investors, we cannot just sit here and obsess over the military tactics. We have to ask the ultimate question: what does this do to the global markets? And how do we position our capital so we do not get absolutely crushed when the threat of a military conflict breaks out right next to the world's largest economy? The financial markets do not react rationally. They react with pure, unadulterated fear. The first thing that happens is a massive immediate spike in the volatility index, the VIX, as big institutional funds start scrambling to hedge their positions. Think about the geography of where this conflict is located, the Straits of Florida and the Caribbean Basin. This area is one of the most vital maritime trade routes on the entire planet, especially for energy transport. Oil tankers coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and massive commercial shipping lines heading to the East Coast ports. If Cuba even looks like it might deploy drones, insurance premiums for commercial shipping in the entire region will skyrocket overnight by 300 to 500%. When shipping insurance goes up, the cost of moving every single barrel of oil, every container of food, and every piece of electronics goes up with it, which means inflation gets a massive unwanted second wind. At the exact same time, you have a massive capital flight away from speculative high-growth assets and a rush into hard defensive safe havens. Let us walk through the exact step-by-step portfolio defense strategy that the smart money uses when the world starts looking dangerous. Rule number one of investing during a geopolitical crisis is that cash is not trash, cash is liquidity, and liquidity is your ultimate weapon. When panic hits the stock market, even great companies get thrown out with the bathwater, and if you are fully invested in highly speculative tech stocks, you will have no capital left to buy the bargains when they hit rock bottom. I always maintain a healthy 15 to 20% cash allocation in a high-yield savings account or short-term treasury bills. When tensions are this high, that cash acts as a massive psychological shield, knowing that if the market drops 3% tomorrow because of a headline, I am not sweating. I am actually getting excited to go shopping for cheap assets. Next, let us look at the obvious play that everyone talks about: defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. When people see a headline about 300 drones in Cuba, their immediate instinct is to rush out and buy defense stocks, thinking they will double overnight. But here is the inside secret that the big institutional players understand. A lot of that war premium is already priced into those massive defense companies long before the public reads about it in the news. Instead of buying the massive, slow-moving aerospace giants at all time highs, the smart money looks at the specific technology driving the conflict, which in this case is counter-drone systems and automated electronic warfare. The Ukraine conflict and this new Cuban drone crisis proved that traditional multi-million-dollar missiles are too expensive to use against cheap drones. If a country fires a $2 million Patriot missile to shoot down a $10,000 drone, they will go bankrupt in a matter of weeks. The real money over the next decade is going into companies that develop directed energy weapons, high-powered microwaves, and advanced jamming technology that can disable hundreds of drones at the press of a button for pennies per hot. That is where you want to look for long-term growth: the tech companies specializing in automation, AI tracking systems, and automated defense networks. Now let us talk about the ultimate financial shield that has protected human wealth for over 5,000 years: physical gold and silver. When a government prints too much money, paper currency loses value, and when countries start flashing long-range weapons at each other, trust in the global financial system starts to crack. Gold does not pay a dividend. It does not generate quarterly earnings, and it just sits there looking pretty. But it has a 0% chance of going to zero, and it cannot be wiped out by a cyber attack or a military strike. During every single major conflict in human history, from the ancient world right up to the modern era, gold has been the final asset standing when the smoke clears. I treat gold not as a speculative trade to get rich quick, but as a literal insurance policy for my net worth. You do not buy home insurance because you want your house to burn down. You buy it so you can sleep peacefully at night knowing you are protected if the worst happens. Having 5 to 10% of your total net worth in physical precious metals or a highly liquid gold ETF is the ultimate financial insurance policy against geopolitical madness. We also have to look closely at the energy sector because energy is the lifeblood of everything. Cuba is currently experiencing brutal rolling blackouts because the U.S. fuel blockade has completely choked off their supply of diesel and crude oil. Russia has tried to keep the lights on in Havana by shipping hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil across the ocean, but that supply line is incredibly fragile right now. If a military skirmish breaks out in the Caribbean, oil prices will instantly jump by $10 to $15 a barrel purely on fear of supply disruptions. To protect yourself from paying massive prices at the gas pump, you want to own the companies that actually pull that oil and natural gas out of the ground. High-quality, cash-flowing energy companies with massive balance sheets and big dividend yields act as a natural hedge against inflation and war-driven supply shocks. When energy prices go up, your cost of living goes up, but the dividends from your energy stocks go up too, effectively washing out the negative impact on your personal finances. But beyond the specific stocks and assets you buy, the absolute most important part of managing your money through a crisis like this is your psychological defense mechanism. The media makes its money by keeping you in a state of constant paralyzing fear, because fear drives clicks, fear drives views, and fear keeps you glued to the screen. When you read a headline that says Cuba has long-range drones targeted at Florida, it is incredibly easy to give in to that fear. Log into your brokerage account and sell all your long-term investments because you think the world is ending. That is the absolute worst financial mistake you can ever make. If you look back at a chart of the S&P 500 over the last 100 years, it has survived World War II. The original Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the Vietnam War, the September 11th attacks, and the global financial crisis. Through every single one of those catastrophic events, the market temporarily dropped, the headlines screamed that doom was imminent, and then the world adapted, companies kept innovating, and the market went on to make brand new all-time highs. The people who built true, multi-generational wealth were not the ones who panicked and ran to the hills. They were the ones who stood their ground, stuck to their plan, and calmly bought high-quality assets while everyone else was panicking. So, While the situation in Cuba is incredibly serious and demands our full attention from a national security perspective, from a wealth perspective, it is a signal to review your plan, not to abandon it. Check your asset allocation. Today, make sure you have enough cash to handle an emergency, make sure you are not over-leveraged on margin, and make sure you own real, tangible businesses that provide essential value to the world. When you have a diversified, resilient portfolio built on solid financial principles, you do not have to live in fear of the morning news cycle. You can look at a crazy headline, process the information calmly, and make strategic, cold-blooded decisions to protect and grow your capital. The world out there might be getting increasingly chaotic, unpredictable, and downright messy. But when your personal finances are locked down like a fortress, you have an unbreakable shield against that chaos piece.